Good morning, members of the gallery and members viewing online, members of council and staff. Welcome to the special council meeting of Thursday, November 21st, 2024. We'll call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. First, we'll begin with the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Kabamonagan is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory in the traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe people. We offer our gratitude to First Nations for their care for and teaching about these lands. May we honor these teachings. Look to council for approval of the agenda today as presented. Moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Councilor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. As you may notice, we're short a few members of council today. So I'm sure there will be more discussion at our next budget meeting because we want to have all the council participate in that. But first of all, we want to wish Councilor Edgerton well. We understand he's under the dealing with a health matter right now, though, so we want to wish him speedy recovery. And Deputy Mayor Huntley is also out of town, unfortunately, and unable to attend. So we look forward to having them both back at council. Moving on, disclosure of pecuniary interests, seeing none, there is no closed session. So we'll move right into the presentation portions, and we have a number being the special budget meeting. So we'll begin with an MPAC update from Sarah Groves. Sarah, you just hit that button on the microphone and
There we go. Perfect. Everybody is good. So good morning. My name is Sarah Groves, and I'm an account manager with the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. I also have with me today my account support coordinator, Victoria, and together we support all of the municipalities within the County of Peterborough, County of Haliburton, the City of Peterborough, and the City of Kawartha Lakes. So today I want you to come away from this presentation with a greater understanding of the assessment and tax system, and know exactly where you can turn should you have any questions or should any of your property owners have any questions. So there are 4 key players in the property assessment and tax system in Ontario, and all have a different role and interest in the process. First, we have the Ontario government, who is responsible for setting assessment and taxation legislation, as well as any policies. MPAC's main role is to determine the current value assessment of each property in Ontario, and we provide an annual assessment role to each municipality. Municipalities then determine budget requirements and set tax rates in order to collect property taxes to pay for all of the municipal services. Municipalities apply the tax rates to MPAC's assessment. So the assessment times the tax rate equals the amount of taxes you should expect to pay on your property. And the ratepayer or property owner pays their property tax. And the other important role that they play is that of the seller or purchaser of properties. And those are the transactions that inform MPAC's current value assessment. So monitoring the market and assessing newly built and renovated properties are things we do every day in order to keep our data current. And we also periodically update every single property assessment across the province based on the same legislated valuation date. And we call this an assessment update or a reassessment. This is when we determined what every single property in Ontario could have reasonably sold for in its current state and condition at that particular point in time. Provincial legislation does determine when we can conduct a province-wide assessment update and sets that valuation date and what that update cycle looks like. We can all agree that the market has changed a lot in the last several years. And the key is that once we are provided direction on a new valuation date and a valuation cycle, all properties will be valued as of that point in time and that date. Okay. And all of the sales and the information around that date is what will inform our values. So Ontario's property tax system is based on everyone paying their portion of what it costs to deliver municipal services. And to do this, all properties are assigned a current valuation date at that common date. So current value assessment is market value as of a point in time. And it's the price a property might reasonably be expected to sell for if sold by a willing seller to a willing buyer after appropriate time and exposure on an open market. So regular revaluation of properties ensures that assessments stay up to date and similar properties of similar value can expect to pay similar property taxes. So as you can imagine, Maintaining Ontario's property database is very important. We continuously update property data so that municipal records are accurate when municipal stakeholders are making important tax decisions. We assess new construction, additions, and renovations promptly. We respond to property owner inquiries and work to help them understand their property assessment. We support municipalities through a platform called Municipal Connect. And we work collaboratively on projects like the electronic building permit information, plan sharing. We process tax applications. We look at and handle severances and consolidations, as well as handling requests for reconsideration. So let's briefly talk about valuation. There are three approaches, three industry standard approaches to valuing properties in the province of Ontario. And the first is the direct comparison approach. And I'll just stick to that one because the direct comparison approach is the majority of what your properties in the township are assessed based on. And that direct comparison approach is when we analyze sales of comparable properties that were sold for similar or identical use to the property to be valued. And this is done on residential properties, condominiums, vacant land. So that's the main approach. And over 90%, obviously 93, 94% of your properties are in the residential tax class. Okay, so when we're looking at the valuation of a residential home, although our analysis considers over 200 factors, these are the top 5 that we take into consideration that make up approximately 85% of a home's value. And those include the location, the lot dimensions, the exterior square footage, the location of the property, and the quality of construction on that property. Okay. Now, once we've done all those things, we've looked at all of those 200 factors, and we've taken all of those different variables into consideration, we apply that assessed value. And not all property owners agree with the assessed value that we have on their property. So in order for them to take a look, they can go on to aboutmyproperty.ca and confirm all of the individual details that we have about their property. Things like the square footage, the number of bedrooms, the size of the garage, any site variables that may be impacting, whether it's there's of course over the 200. So once you go on to About My Property and confirm all of those details, property owners can also look at up to 100 other properties and fine tune and nail down into 24 properties at the very same level that they can see the detail on theirs. Once they've reviewed their property, if they still disagree with the value that we've applied, they can file a request for reconsideration directly through that portal. We'll take a look at their property free of charge, and we essentially just want to make sure that the information is correct. So we'll take a look and make any changes if there are any changes necessary. Property owners can also follow that request for reconsideration directly through the timeline from when we receive it to when we take a look to when we do an inspection with them to when we come to our final agreement on the value and if there is a change. Okay. So on the next slide, so let's spend a moment to address that relationship between the property taxes and the property assessment. So assessments distribute taxes. They don't determine the amount of taxes paid. The most important factor is not how much the assessed value of a property has changed, but rather how that assessed value has changed relative to the average change in that class in the community. So the next few slides are really going to showcase all of the supports that we have for property owners as well as you as council. So we have the First Time Homeowners Hub. We have door hangers letters. We send out inspection letters when we're heading out to a property. We do have several social media campaigns that are ongoing, and we have educational videos showcased on our YouTube site. So our focus is always on building awareness about property assessment and taxation and MPAC's role in that process. So we understand that property assessment can be complex, and we hear that from municipalities as well as property owners. So this is why we communicate with property owners and Ontarians. And you may notice that we're out there in social media, doing social media blasts, getting out in front of you guys more frequently, just to ensure that everybody understands. from social media campaigns, as I mentioned, educational videos. We have the First Time Homeowners Hub, which was launched almost about this time last year. All of this information can help support property owners navigate the assessment and tax system. And we want to ensure that our resources are easy to understand, they're out there and easily accessible for property owners and municipalities should they need them. So we also have an insights campaign that we launched earlier this year. Some of you may have seen this in our social media posts earlier this year and throughout the summer. So this campaign focuses on how the residential property landscape has evolved in the last decade. So specifically the housing inventory. And what we've learned is that year over year price increases are driving home buyers to look at communities further outside the Greater Toronto Horseshoe area. So communities with homes under $500,000 are becoming increasingly scarce across the province. And the type and location of homes that are worth $750,000 or less has also shifted. So what does this mean? This means that there's limited options for some of those first-time home buyers. In 2013, 74% of the residential properties in Ontario had a home value estimate of less than $500,000, with 91% being less than $750,000. That number today has dropped to about 19% and 48% respectively. So we know that there's a lot of factors at play. So things like supply and demand, increased construction and labor costs, all of those things are what drive today's prices. So in order to find properties for less than $500,000, buyers can look to cities like Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie, North Bay, Thunder Bay, and Windsor, where we're kind of in the area of $750,000 and less. And that exists in other areas like Ottawa, London, Kitchener, Barrie. Okay. So last year, we sent over 713,000 property assessment notices, and our property assessment notices are in the mail. They may be held up through the postal strike currently. All properties that would have received a property assessment notice, property owners can still go on to About My Property and view that notice while we're waiting on the delay for the postal strike to finish. But a lot of those homeowners that would have received a notice last year or maybe receiving a notice this year may be first-time home buyers. So this homeowners hub is exactly that. It really directs property owners to understanding what they can expect from their assessment, how it relates to their taxes that they can expect to see, answers questions like, what can I expect when a property inspector comes to visit? What should I expect to see on my information on About My Property, and how they can confirm all of that information. So really, it just helps address the questions from first-time homeowners who may have never seen a notice before, may have no idea who MPAC is. So there is a page directly associated with first-time homeowners. Next slide, please. So also in the past year or two, we've done a push on our social media campaigns, as mentioned, and you may be familiar with that salmon, red, orangish color boxes with that turquoise there. And those are the Myths and Facts campaign. And we've found that they've been very popular with homeowners as well as with municipalities pushing it out on your municipal websites. They're literally like the Coles Notes version of property assessment and taxes, and gives you real life examples. So for instance, that first one, my property value has doubled. That means my taxes are going to double. That's actually a myth. So when in a couple slides, we'll take a look at a video that's there and that'll explain that one. So there's things like that out in our social media. Any of those posts that you see, you're welcome to share on your social media as well. Okay. So next up is that video. Are we able to play that video? That's okay. No pressure, right?
Thanks, others.
Okay, that's fine. That's totally fine. So it is linked in the presentation. If you have an electronic version of it, you should be able to click on the on that and it'll take you right to the YouTube site. Otherwise, you can go to the mpact.ca YouTube site and view the video from there. It's a quick tutorial on understanding the changes that may come if you see a change in your assessed value. And what that may or may not do to your property taxes depending on the municipal budget. So it's a really good short video that I recommend you take a moment to watch and or share out to property owners if they have questions. Okay. So on the next slide, I briefly talked about my property, and we also refer to it as AMP. So for those unfamiliar, I'll just keep going. AMP is a valuable tool that allows property owners to review information we have on file. So if we go back one. Perfect. So once logged in, property owners can learn how their property was assessed, compare their home to others in the area, as I mentioned, and if they disagree with their assessment, they can file that request for reconsideration directly through that About My Property portal. About My Property increases transparency, allows for easier accessibility for property owners, and empowers property owners with the self-serve portal and the access to that vital information. So as mentioned, they can view property information, valuation information, sale information on their property, site information, primary structure data, locational influences like those site variables that I had talked about. Any published notices on their property back to 2012 are available to view unless there's been a sale. So we don't, once that time of sale does happen, the information from that date forward is available for property owners. They can update their school support directly through About My Property. So I do have a slide on that coming up. The methodology guides, market valuation reports, all of this information is on there. And as I mentioned, there is the Browse My Neighborhood option within About My Property. And this is allowing users to navigate in an interactive map. They can view snapshots of those 100 properties I mentioned and look at favorites and download customized reports for up to 24 properties. So they can really take a look, compare their information, make sure it makes sense with all of the others that we may be using to compare to theirs as well. Okay. And on the next slide, so as mentioned, you can update your school support designation as a property owner directly through About My Property. If you're a tenant, there is a little bit of a different path, but it's all linked together. And this is an important mechanism for property owners to update their school support, okay? This was launched last year. It's been very popular. Property owners, just in case some don't know, school support does default to English public. So if you've purchased a property and didn't make that change since that purchase and you wish to support a different designation, you just need to go on to About My Property and make that adjustment through there. And with this new online portal, you'll receive a confirmation email once you've changed that. And shown on the right side here is that paper application to direct school support or the ADSS form. We still do accept those as well. So the portal allows easier access for those that like the electronic, but we still accept the paper forms through the school boards. Okay. So we also support municipalities, and we do this on a regular basis. So we have engagements like this with council. We have meetings with your finance department on a regular basis. We meet with the building department. We have engagements with the planning department as well. We attend municipal conferences. We host webinars. We have training videos as well. And we provide ongoing support for all of those products and services that we provide through our platform, as well as that assessment role that we deliver in December. So meeting with our municipal partners is crucial to building strong relationships and understanding the communities that we serve and that we live in. So MPAC staff work closely with municipal administration and councils to educate and share all of this valuable information. So in 2023, we're still nailing down 2024. So in 2023, we had over 1,800 municipal engagements with over 18,000 municipal inquiries. So those inquiries would have been things like property specific, confirming zoning, building permit information or questions about that, property ownership changes, plans and severances, updating municipal and or mailing address as well. Okay. So on the next slide, you'll see that these are all again labeled 2023. We're working on nailing down that 2024 municipal partnership report, as well as our performance report and the annual report. So you'll have those in your hands early next year. So you'll be able to take a look at those. You can also look at these 2023 ones right now on our mpact.ca website. And they really highlight our accountability and our transparency to municipalities and all of the property owners across the province. Okay. So I think that's the last slide. So here's my contact information and the contact information for my regional manager, should you wish to reach out later. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Sarah. Obviously, Impact plays a critical role in the topic we're discussing today with regards to the budget. Questions for Sarah? Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair to Sarah. The big question is, we're still dealing with numbers from 2016. When is the government of Ontario ever think they're going to get things back on track, and how are you going to compensate, or how's that adjustment going to be impacted to the average taxpayer who's going to see a notable jump? And I know your video tells me that just because the assessments go way up, I might be paying less tax. I have trouble with that, but I just wonder if there's anything that's actually been proposed to kind of ease that into play.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Byrne. Thank you for that question. So right now we are on a pause. We have been on a pause since 2020 due to a decision made by the provincial government. We're also currently undergoing right now a provincial tax and assessment system review. So that's looking at everything. So until that review is done and the provincial government has kind of come to their conclusions on that, we'll still be in this steady state of January 1st, 2016 values. Now, even though we're on January 1st, 2016, you build a house last year, that value, we still backdate to January 1st, 2016. So everybody is still based on that same valuation date for equitable purposes. At such time when the province decides the next valuation date and an update cycle, that'll determine how it's kind of rolled out. The last couple assessment cycles have been a 4-year phase-in. So any increase since the last date would be increased incrementally over 4 years, or 25% change each year in your assessed values. If there's a decrease between those assessment cycles, it's usually applied automatically. But again, when we take a look at that video, even if say your assessment doubles and the municipal budget stays the same, your taxes are actually going to go down. Now, when do we ever see taxes going down? Anywhere is very rare, but it gives you that that you're not going to see a double in your property assessment in relation to your taxes when that does happen. That video, it does explain it pretty clearly for any property owners that have those questions or concerns.
Thank you for that, Sarah. So that comment of the response to Councillor Byrne is kind of predicated on when the municipality gets that information. Because if we don't adjust the line rate and the property values change, we will be overtaxing. So I hope that the province doesn't forget this time that municipal budget cycles are not in the month of March. Right? They are usually done in January, February. And we've had those issues before with discussions about downloading services and extra costs to municipalities mid-year. But once the budget's done, we don't have the opportunity to re-evaluate or kick out another request and for budgeting purposes. So I think one of the other elements on that point that I think I've been asked about a number of times, and it's a complicated world to answer, and you touched on a couple components of it, but I think what the output from this pause is causing a lot of disruption and inequity with regards to the application of the tax rates from municipalities. Because to your point, if there's certain investments or reinvestments in property that affect the assessed value, well, that assessed value is increased. But if there's just newer properties with those amenities that have a higher value, well, they're still defaulted to 2016. So the classification of the various residential properties is becoming further and further or less and less equitable. because of that sort of piecemeal investment and piecemeal assessment, we're having a number of homes that, you know, from investments have reassessments and increase their values, but that's not being done across the board. So obviously there's a lot to do and we're all waiting with bated breath. I think from municipalities, it's been the hottest topic of conversation at the Roma conference since the pause probably. So anyway, so we're all, you know, very much looking forward to that. But the one takeaway I hope is that rollout needs to be also accounting for the fact and the timeline for municipal budgets, or else there will be 1 year, to Councillor Burns' point, of extreme overtaxing if it's not done correctly with enough notice to adjust the line rate. Nope, that's just a comment. But anyways, thank you for that. Other questions, Sarah?
Thank you for you, Chair, for the presentation, Sarah. Just a couple of short questions. The first one was in follow up. Better? Got it. Better? There we go. Thank you. Sorry. In follow up to Councillor Burns' question, you referenced a review. Do you have an idea of when the review is going to be finished?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Natrop, I don't have any indication right now of when that review will be completed.
How long have they already been starting to do this review so we can maybe have an understanding? Is this going to take 2 years, 5 years? Just a speculation.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Natrop, I believe they announced the review, I want to say April of 2024. They are well underway. They've done lots of engagements with municipalities, property owners, different parts of the provincial government as well. So I know that is all undergoing. I know we have regular meetings with the Ministry of Finance. But again, I don't know when the end goal is or the end in sight. I'm not sure.
Thank you. Okay. Just two other questions. The one was the 3 approaches you had to evaluating properties, and that you had specified that the most common one was the direct comparison approach. And you referenced residential, condo, and vacant land. Which approach is used for agricultural or farming?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Natrop. So typically the agricultural land is through the residential or the direct comparison approach. Again, agriculture is a little bit of a different, more specialized property. But again, any sales that we see from farmer to farmer sales is what is accounted for in our comparisons.
Okay. You were giving statistics from 2013 about the cost for $500,000 and $700,000 ones, and you gave percentages. I wasn't able to write down, when was the other follow-up year that you provided and you gave the new rates? What year was that?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Natrop. So in 2013, that was our base starting. We do have values at 2018 on this portal online, but what I was reporting out on was 2023. So the comparison over that 10-year period.
One last question. This one should be an easy one. The offices in Peterborough used to be on Lansdowne, and then now I see that they're not there. Did you move somewhere else, or is there no longer an office in Peterborough?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Natrop. So we were at 1477 Lansdowne Street. We are currently in the midst of reopening an office, and it's still on Lansdowne Street. It's in the back of that, what is it, Parkway? What's the plaza? Where Mark's used to be, where Shula's Joe's is, at 1135 Lansdowne. We're down at the back through at the bottom. You can access us down through the stairs. We aren't open to the public currently. We're still transitioning from what we like to call a swing space as they're finishing construction on the new office. But property owners can reach out to us at any time. We can set up times and appointments, whether they come to us or we can come to them. Thank you.
Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair to Sarah, if a neighborhood has a new house or an older house sell and at the current market value with one person, whatever, how does that impact every other house in that vicinity though? They're going to see an increase in their assessed value just because of that new sale, if I've got it right. Even though they haven't done anything to their own property, that's going to elevate it just because of those comparisons, even though nobody actually goes out physically looking to see what the differences might be from one residence to another?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Byrne. So we look at properties of similar size, similar construction, similar lot size, all of those, and compare to that sale. We don't look at just one sale. We ensure that analysis incorporates an appropriate amount of sales. I don't know what that number is, but if there's only one sale in that one neighborhood, that one sale isn't going to make all of those other homes of that similar size construction increase. It would be an analysis of several sales on several homes across the municipality or across several neighborhoods within the municipality.
But just for further clarity to Councilor Byrne's question, it's like, again, those other neighboring values are only affected when the reassessment is done. Like there's not intermittent, and like, you know, we're still at pause, so we're still 2016, right? So if there's a house in a neighborhood, it doesn't, like, there's no change until the assessment impacts that change. It's, you know, what's different than property improvements where you're installing certain things, then it causes a reassessment. That doesn't impact everyone else until the whole assessment is done. And then that's what the data is that brings up that local data. Is that correct, Sarah? I just want to confirm.
Yes, through you, Mayor, that is correct. So if that sale happened in 2024, and for some reason, this is just an example, that in the future, that valuation date is chosen as 2024, all of those sales on or around that date in 2024 will be what is the premise for the valuation of the next assessment cycle.
Follow up, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, yes. No, I understood that part about the timing, but the big concern I hear from most people is the fact that any improvements they might do to their properties for whatever reason is at their own expense. And a lot of those improvements do not drive up the cost of the municipality to service that particular resident. Yet they feel punished for spending their money to make improvements that only reflect in a higher assessed value, which is impacted in the tax rate farther down the road. So that negativity of what you do to improve your property or to maintain your property is a net cost to them on both sides of the equation. So I get it that at some point in time, the provincial government's going to have to come to some kind of terms with things. But all those new improvements along the way to any particular resident impacts that assessed value at that current date that the permit's taken out, correct?
Through your, Mayor, to Councilor Byrne, that is correct. I wouldn't look at that as a negative. Any improvements to your home is a positive for your resale value, your investment, and the equity that you have in your home.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you, Sarah, for that informative presentation, and we'll get the links to those videos. I know we always have them hosted on the site as well as a part of the presentation. So with that, Council, can we receive the MPAC updates presentation from Sarah and for information? Moved by Councilor Byrne, second by Councilor Natchez, all in favor? That is approved. Thanks very much, Sarah, and good luck with the move. Next is 6.2, Cavan Monaghan Public Library Board, Carla Buckborough presenting. Earl, are you presenting as well, or just Carla? Just Carla. Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Good morning. I am here to give a first look at the library 2025 budget, but I would first like to start with a brief update of what's happened over the year at the CM libraries. Next slide. It's been a very busy year at the libraries. Some of the highlights are listed on the screen. We are most excited about the connections that we have made through the community with our activities. Staff have enjoyed making outreach visits to the CMCC summer camps and to the daycares. That was all new for this year. Our adult story time, a partnership with Caris Homes, used to be Christian Horizons, and Centennial Place, continues to draw a crowd. Over the past couple of years, we've been watching a change in how the Harry Williams Room at the Millbrook branch is being used. Children and families see it as a destination, but there's been a disconnect because the children's books were in the main part of the library, but the toys and what they wanted to play with or where they wanted to be was in the Harry Williams Room. So I brought a report to the board, worked with staff, and we have started to make the Harry Williams a dedicated children's library. Report so far, we're only halfway through the process. Parents love it. They can now choose books with their children while the children are playing with the toys in the room, and everything feels that it's the way it should be. We are now hosting some of our adult events upstairs in the Dorothy Stevens room, sharing the space with the Early On Center. Next slide. Our biggest success this year was the completion of our first seniors community grant, culminating in this book, Collecting Our Stories. I'll just bring up. The books were not a history of the Township of Cavan-Monaghan. They are memoirs and thoughts and poems from people who participated in our seniors grant. Our first grant, being very successful, was luckily followed by a second seniors community grant, which is currently underway with a series of activities at both library branches. The focus of the grants is to prevent social isolation in the senior population. While it's wonderful to see people coming together, I was stopped in my tracks when one participant said that this project saved her life. That floored me. I didn't realize, I love to think that the library is a meaningful place, but that put it in a new perspective. Next slide. For some statistics, by October 31st, we have added 272 new patrons to the library. We have a 7% circulation increase of both our physical and virtual last year till October 31st compared to October 31st this year, and 34% more participants in our programs this year than last year to October 31st. I'm excited to see where that number goes. I don't think we have ever hit over 5,000 people participating in our programs in a year. And so to, at October 31st, be at 5,355, to me is quite remarkable. Our virtual branch has been seeing a steady increase year over year. Currently, we're at 18,821 circulations through the virtual branch. So that's things like our Libby service, the ebooks, Hoopla, which does ebooks and TV and movies, and Canopy, which shows movies that people can download onto their devices and look at from home. My projections are that we will hit over 22,000 circulations through those this year. This number could be higher if we had more capacity in the ebook system. We share the system, Libby, with other libraries in Ontario, and while the book is on my device, it can't be on your device. That's how they deal with the copyright rules. And so then there can be extended waits for materials, and we actually are losing some of our patrons because of the fact that they have to wait too long. So one of the budget items I have is to increase the amount of money we spend on Libby so that I can add more content that is only available for the residents of Cavan-Monaghan. Next slide. This just shows that we are on target this year to circulate over 50,000 items between our physical branch and our virtual branch, which means that we're still looking at about 30,000 circulations of physical material, the books and DVDs that we have in our libraries. I'm quite happy with these numbers. Next. As I mentioned, we have had 2 seniors grants. We also received grants from the Ontario government and Young Canada Works, which allowed us to hire summer staff. I will be applying for these grants and any others of which I become aware. Our seniors grant this time wasn't quite as large. I only requested 13,900 because I was looking at a shorter time frame with the other grant having been a much longer, more in-depth. When we come into the grant cycle for the next seniors grant, I will try for the full 25,000 that they have available. The nice thing about the seniors the seniors community grants, it allows me to offset wages, which helps out with our library programming. The next couple slides talk about our strategic plan. And so we don't lose sight of our vision and mission. the statements are included on each of our agendas so that they are there top and center for us to look at as we progress through our board meetings. Next slide. These are the strategic directions that were accepted by the board in 2023 that we have been using for 2024 to guide what we do, the direction that we go, and the work that we are doing. I know that there's a lot of text on this slide. This slide shows that we are requesting a 4.1% increase in our operating levy. The increase in salaries and benefits is comprised of the 2% cost of living, same as that is used by the township, progression along the grid of a single step for some staff, increased mandatory employment costs, and budget for summer students dependent on grants. Other operating expenses are increased by $3,000 to accommodate the increases in software licenses and the growing usage of our e-resources, our virtual branch. For the capital budget, I have it separated into two parts. Our circulating materials, so that's our books, DVDs, and the ebooks, and then the IT is another page. I'm requesting a small increase, and this goes back to that slide that I showed with the graph where we are on track to do 22,000 circulations through the virtual library. I'm asking for $1,500, which doubles how much we have been spending to purchase ebooks and see how much that will get us for capacity. The budget for ebooks has been helping with our capacity, but we are still falling behind in terms of wait lists. So when it comes to the IT investment, I won't go through the entire history of it. It's been a bit of a long process. We are looking at using the Peterborough County IT department to assist with managing our IT. In November 2023, Christopher Lee from the Peterborough County IT provided a report to us outlining the current state of the library tech and made about a dozen suggestions on what needs to be improved for the county to start managing our network, hardware, and software. By the time the report had been received and discussed, there was insufficient time to spend the $7,000 received in the 2023 budget, and the money was rolled forward to the 2024 budget as IT investment. The majority of Mr. Lee's findings centered on the network equipment and cabling in the Millbrook branch. Throughout this fall, we've been correcting these deficiencies. The delay until the fall was due to the reorganizing of the library space, the shifting of creating the children's library in the Harry Williams room, and then the changes that makes in our main room. Now that that is underway, work on the technology has begun. A secure enclosure has been purchased, internet equipment has been installed within it, and this coming Monday, a team of volunteers is helping with more reorganizing at the Millbrook branch that will provide the opportunity to address the visible cabling and network concerns that Mr. Lee had. Quotes have been received this week for the county's preferred security software and for computers leveraging purchasing agreements through the Ontario Education Collaborative Marketplace, otherwise known as OECM. Between security software and computers, I will spend out the remainder of the 2024 IT investment budget. The 2025 budget will be used to continue the hardware purchases, plus rectifying more of the deficiencies outlined in the report. The next three slides provide the same information as my presentation, but with more detail. I won't go through it unless you want me to. Page 3, so if you want to keep going. Next, stop on that one. That does show our reserves that we have. The library has a small reserve fund created from donations made by patrons to the library. I hold that aside, and then I request the money from the board to support projects. Currently, with the reorganization of the library, there is a potential need for shelving. I haven't ordered anything yet. I'm moving everything first and then see what I need to order, but I asked the board for permission to access up to $6,000 for the move. The projector in the library has hit end of life. It's 10 years old. It's starting to have problems, and we use it quite frequently. And so that was another thing that I requested to come out of the donation reserves. I can answer any questions on that that are needed at a later time. All right, there. You know, it's funny, you do this so many times, I still trip over my tongue. The remaining pages are the summary of the operating budget. The next page is the, shows the capital fund, what has been spent, what was budgeted, what we're requesting. And then the last set of pages are the accounting for the seniors community grant. I have read through the budget report that Ms. Pope will be bringing forward shortly. I understand that reductions are being requested. I hope council sees how valuable the library is to our community and will accept the library's budget. As I said at the beginning of my presentation, it's been a very busy year in the library. I'm proud of what the library, what my staff, and what the board have accomplished, and the difference we make in the community.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks for that great presentation. A lot of information and very well laid out, I would say. So I'm more familiar with others serving on the library board, so I'll give first crack at questions for other members of council. Councillor Byrne, you're up.
Through the chair, I was just kind of curious about that Libby program. You were talking about you'd like to get more content, but the restriction was devices. So is that the individual computers that you have? Or when a person comes down to the library, can they bring their own laptop, and is that counted as a device? Or where's the confusion there for me?
Libby is an app that you download onto your device if you have a smartphone, or you can use it on your computer. It can be used at the library or at your house. The issue is that with copyright laws, if you borrow a book from the library, only you have access to that book. And so with the e-resources, they do the same thing because all the publishers want their money. And so while I'm reading the book on my iPad, no one else has access to that item. And so it requires having multiple copies. Then in our library, we often buy two copies of a book. With Libby, we're part of a consortium that is serving all of the libraries in Ontario with populations of less than 100,000. And so that just inflates exponentially the number of people that are trying to access the copies that have been purchased. So then for the past probably about 6 years, I've had a small budget ranging from, I think it started at about $500 and now up to $1,500. And this year I'm asking to double it to $3,000 so that I can purchase material that only patrons in Cavan Monaghan have access to. So I take a look at lists provided by Libby that show me what our patrons have on hold, the books that they want to read. I go in and purchase copies of those so then our patrons have access to them. It's hard for me to know in advance which ones to buy, so I am always a little bit behind. I wait till the lists build and then I make the purchase. I'm not sure, does that answer the question?
Thanks for that, Carla. One question I had is with regards in the minutia of the reporting, you've identified the 6,500 for DCs. Just confirm for me, because I'm just a bit confused with have we spent the 65 from the DCs from the previous ask? Because it's shown in brackets as though it's just a bit confusing. I don't have exact invoices or things like that, but I'm assuming that's a part of the capital purchasing process. So there's no remainder or rollover from the DC contribution. Okay, that's confirmation of one. So then my next question is, if with regards to the expansion that what you just spoke about in increasing those online, access to more units online for the books purposes, I think that is DC eligible. And I think it's an opportunity that if we're expanding that offering, you could it's justification to increase your DC request because it's growth on top of what you're already existing. So it's not necessarily a reduction in the budget, but what I would maybe suggest is maybe to speak with Ms. Pope. We have a couple more kicks at this can, but maybe, I think we talked about this before is, it's important that the library have an established, like, how we're going to determine each year what our growth implications are so that we're getting a fair shake of our DC allocation, right? Because we're collecting it. But we do need to show justification for why it's going up. But you've got a lot of good metrics in your presentation that could be a part of some formula to create. And then year over year, we just say, okay, well, this is what it's telling us. So this warrants a 2% increase in our DC request or there, so forth, right? And we know there are certain things that aren't DC eligible, but I think materials and online resources are explicitly one of the things that are. So you might not have to increase your capital ask. You might be able to fund it through increasing your DC ask if there's, and I believe there is. So might I just suggest that's not a reduction in your budget, but maybe have a conversation with Ms. Pope or maybe even the library board at the next meeting and just say, hey, let's just determine exactly if the formula is right and what of this growth pressure might be a reason that we don't have to increase the capital budget. We can get the same materials funded through DCs because they're eligible. Ms. Pope, we can make time for that conversation. I'm sure we have many weeks to go. Anyways, okay, so that's just one part of feedback on my end. Other questions from members of council? No? If not, we can take a motion to receive the presentation for information at this time. Councillor Natchoff and Councillor Byrne, all in favor. That's approved. Thanks, Carla. We'll see you next time. And it's nice to see the branding, by the way, in the new branding in the presentation. It looks great. Very bright, vibrant. Excellent. Next is 6.3. Oh, excuse me. So we don't have a representative from the downtown BIA, so we need a motion to defer the presentation until the next meeting. Moved by Councillor Burns, second by Councillor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. We'll see them next time. Next is Robert Jackson, Chair of Miller Valley Trails. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Robert Jackson. I'm the Chair of the Millbrook Valley Trails. I'm here this morning to talk about our request for our 2025 operating budget. In our October 25th meeting, a motion was passed for the following request from Cavan-Monaghan Council in regard to the Millbrook Valley Trails Advisory Committee 2025 operating budget. That is $4,800 for materials and supplies and $2,000 for contracted services. $4,800 for materials and supplies generally makes up wood, trail making tools and supplies such as nails and screws, as well as signage for the trails. The vast majority of the $2,000 for contracted services goes for our yearly spraying on the trails for things such as poison ivy and invasive species such as dog strangling vine. We also have an additional request for the 2025 capital budget. Just a bit of a background to this. Since the trails were initiated in 2000, dedicated volunteers have built all the trail infrastructure throughout our network. That infrastructure has always met or exceeded code. Mayor Graham and Councillor Natchoff have had the pleasure of being the township representatives on the Millbrook Valley Trails. And they, I think, would attest to the fact that during our work days and when we're building infrastructure, we quite often, the vast majority of the time, have more people than jobs. We have a vastly dedicated group of volunteers when it comes to building this infrastructure. Unfortunately, we've recently been told that due to insurance concerns, the committee and our volunteers are no longer allowed to build bridges on the trail network, and it must be tendered out to certified contractors. Representing the committee here, we feel it's highly unfortunate that this is the case, that we are sort of being dictated to what we can and cannot do by insurance companies after 23 years of successful and very cost-saving building of our infrastructure. So to that end, we have a request in the capital budget for one new capital project of $15,000 to replace the bridge near the old Millbrook School and the library. This bridge is from the year 2000. It's an original part of the trails. And much like a lot of our existing infrastructure, it's getting to be past its useful and safe lifespan. I've taken a few pictures of it. It's still safe to use. There's no immediate concerns, but it does need to be replaced and so we're highlighting that as, again, a request for the 2025 capital budget. Mr. Allison has recently given an estimate, cost estimate of almost $13,000 to be able to replace that bridge. And again, I think that, I'm not sure whether that means that we need to have that exact amount, I believe is $12,890. Or if we just keep it at $15,000, because my understanding is that quote does not include HST. Anyway, that is it. We've had, again, another very successful year on the trails. We've had a very good work day. We usually hold those in early May. We had a lot of work done, a lot of work still to do. We are in the process of updating some of our signage and replacing all of our trail pamphlet boxes and dog waste boxes throughout the trail network, as well as we've spent a lot of this past year doing a lot of new signage for the trails. In terms of color coding the trails and giving more visual aids to the users of the trails, which we've seen a large uptake since COVID of out of township users for the trails. And there's always a lot of people out there. And I think, you know, it is one of, as is often stated, one of the treasures of our community. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the members of the committee and their dedication, as well as all the volunteers that we have come out and make our trails better for everyone. Any questions?
Yeah, the battery's just dying on that, so Cindy's gonna replace it while I'm talking, so we'll figure that out. Okay, thanks, Robert, for that presentation. It's great to see that the boardwalk work has been completed. I mean, that's a great improvement in that, as well as the bridge on Meds Mountain. I've been, you know, on the trails most weeks, and it's been great to see them enhanced and expanded. But obviously, again, having been a part of many trails work days in the past few years, it's always great to see the volunteers come out and want to improve the trails that they use. So great work on that. Questions, members of council, Mr. Jackson? Councilor Byrne.
Yes, yes. I'll ask the question. When you get a mic, you can answer. Is there no way to push back against this? Lawyers and insurance companies just making things ridiculously expensive when, like you said, a long history, most of this township was built by community stuff, people involved. And I just get sick of being bullied into this idea that the average person can't do the work and it couldn't be acceptable. Why we have to go to that expense.
Well, I don't think Mr. Jackson can answer that. That's more of a municipal question because it's our exposure. So Ms. Hurley or, well, that one's not working either, but Ms. Hurley, would you like to speak to that while we continue to work on this mic battery issue?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Byrne, it is a shame, but it is the way that municipalities have to deal with insurance companies to protect the public. Things have changed with regards to insurance and requirements under the municipal world that we live in. Some structures, as you can see, some of our structures, we would have to require, like the last one, the bridge that we just recently replaced was actually had a high beam, et cetera. We can't get insurance on carrying and, you know, building bridges that maybe require certain safety requirements that need to be done. And insurance is something we have to deal with in the public safety. And so for having insurance on these types of works, we need to ensure that they're built, built by a professional, and they are able to meet the insurance requirements that we have. So it's also important to note that, you know, we've been a part of the Millbrook Valley Trail since I started here as well. The work is unbelievable what this committee does, the effort that the committee puts into all of the work that they have done, but it is required when it comes to building that insurance covers that for the safety of the public. So therefore, it's what we have to deal with nowadays.
Yeah, and just to build on that, in addition to the reassessment from the previous presentation that there's a well talked about discussion at the Roma conference, municipal liability and insurance implications is the other thing that, there's been promised work on this and changes to the realities of the municipal liability and the unique work that we do. And there's been promises made, but there's been no announcement or no changes actually come forward from any work that's being done or any reviews that are conducted at this time. But it is probably, if not, depending on the year, ahead of the reassessment, but usually neck and neck as 1 and 1A were the topics that municipalities are asking the province. And they're the only entity that can really change the implications of the game for us. So we'll keep on that advocacy, but seeing no, Councillor Natchoff has a question.
Not a question, just a comment. I just wanted to thank the committee. I've had the pleasure of the last couple of years working with you guys and just commending everyone, both current and past, of all of the amazing work that you guys do, the volunteers that you have. And I know that we're, as a committee, we can definitely come together and work to positively ensure that we can continue with the vibrancy of the Millbrook Valley Trails. And I'm excited to where we can kind of look at things in the big picture long term. And yeah, just you're doing a wonderful job. As a business owner, just talking to people in the community, visiting the community, both local residents and especially visitors. It's just a crown jewel in the community, and definitely a driving force for tourism to bring it in. So we definitely, you have my support moving forward to doing all that we can to make sure that we continue doing the good work there. So thank you, Rob, for yourself and all the rest of the crew.
Yeah, and thank you, Rob, for your longstanding service in that committee as well. You've been a stalwart of that for decades, so thanks for that. Any other questions? If not, we'll take a motion to receive the presentation for information. Moved by Councillor Natchoff, second by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for coming. Next item on the agenda, 6.5, Ashley Stewart, Chair, and John Culver, Vice Chair, Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Awards. Oh, excuse me. So there is, I understand from staff just now that there's a revised presentation. So we need to have a motion to receive the revised presentation as a part of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Natchoff, second by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? That's approved. All right, now you're good to go, Ashley. Thank you. So just for council's purposes, that's the printed copy that we have is the revised one. Okay.
My name is Ashley Stewart, and I am the current chair of the Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee. I became a committee member in January 2019, and this past January I was elected chair. I bring to the committee the personal perspective of a Cavan Monaghan resident since 2017 and the professional knowledge and experience of a licensed architect in the province of Ontario with a specialization in heritage buildings and structures. I have over 10 years of experience, all with a firm that has over 40 years of experience in the heritage field, and all the architects I trained under are members of CAP, the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals. Heritage projects I've been involved with and a key team member of are vast in both location, type, heritage status, and many have resulted in CAP awards and a Governor General's Medal in Architecture Award. With my experience, I've been able to assist the township staff with the review of the draft heritage bylaws prior to being presented to council for final approval. To date, we have completed 8 and are working hard to complete the remaining drafts so that all bylaws will be updated to the current format as required by the Ontario Heritage Act. As chair, I would like to discuss today the proposed projects we've submitted for the 2025 budget consideration. The first is the contracted services for the mural restoration downtown for $1,500. The second is the Heritage Awards for $500. The third is the Station Park landscaping for $1,000. The fourth is the cultural mapping project in which we are seeking $29,300 for a heritage summer student and $7,000 for resulting wayfinding signage and costs associated with and resulting from this project. The current cultural mapping inventory, which was last updated in 2011, is significantly out of date. And with the built fabric of the township quickly changing, the committee sees this as a critical undertaking. The inventory needs to be updated by confirming what structures are still existing and to document additional structures, sites, and events that are significant to the culture, history, and unique fabric that is Cavan Monaghan. This project would be ideal for a summer student. The successful precedent was set with this type of project methodology with the updating of the heritage bylaws. In addition, the updating of this inventory would also tie into the larger initiative that we see evolving from the Station Park signage project. The last request is for the Station Park signage, in which we are asking for $7,000 rollover from 2020-24 and an additional $7,000 for our total project budget of $14,000. The Station Park signage project was formerly the downtown mural and has morphed in the past years. The current committee inherited the project, and our 2024 committee members took the perspective not to complete projects for the sake of completion and their associated financial allotment, but to be thoughtful and aware of larger project implications for the community, such as the signage project. Our goal is that this project will be a catalyst for initiatives by providing a signage template for wayfinding, historical, and similar applications within the township. My fellow committee member, John Culver, is here today to provide additional information and graphics for your consideration. John moved to Millbrook in 2019. He joined the committee in 2024, January of 2024, and is also on the board of the Cavan Monaghan Historical Society. As a senior landscape architect, John has over 45 years of experience in a diverse range of projects in both the private and municipal sectors. He's a member of the Ontario Association of Landscape Architects, Canadian Society of Landscape Architects, and International Federation of Landscape Architects. His career has been dedicated to the implementation of innovative, creative, yet cost-effective solutions that inspire. He has a passion and respect for the built form and its relationship to the environment. Some of his project award recognition includes a Landscape Ontario Award, Sign Association of Canada Excellence in Design Award for Wayfinding, and many more. John, I now hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ashley. Members of council, I came to join the Revitalization and Historical Advisory Committee because I've got 45 years of experience designing in the public realm. When we just looked at initially at the railroad signage, I had some concerns over the fact that we were either going to be putting a mural on the wall panels that would be below eyesight level, or we'd have to put the panels above eyesight level and therefore then start to screen off the interior area of the gazebo. And then, according to the way I usually do things, I said, wait a minute, I think this gives us an opportunity to look at possibly handling how we're going to handle this particular signage project a little differently. So we presented to council earlier a revised concept, which you accepted. Since then, and the reason we're coming to the council, is that this opens up a whole new aspect of wayfinding. Currently, the municipality has a progressive code, graphics code standards, but nothing in the way of a wayfinding or signage strategy. A lot of other smaller communities, similar to the size of Millbrook, do. So what is wayfinding? Well, it's wayfinding in its design is the process of organizing spatial environmental information to help visitors and residents find a destination. It's a high-functioning wayfinding system, makes the environment easier to navigate and enhances visitors' experiences as it increases their comfort, builds their confidence, and encourages them to discover unique events, attractions, and destinations on their own. Wayfinding is a vital tool of economic development. Municipalities are becoming more increasingly aware of the impact of wayfinding systems on economic development, tourism, and brand development. Wayfinding is more than just signage. It's a continuation and physical unification of the municipal brand. It creates a lasting impression. Wayfinding combines marketing, consensus building, identity planning, function, and design. Next slide, please. So what should Millbrook's wayfinding goals be? Well, create a solid plan and system that maintains and continues to build our brand image and public awareness, facilitating, supporting, and revitalizing local business and economic development opportunities, making it easier for visitors to find key destinations and encourage exploration by visitors and residents. For example, one of the things we considered was how we could create QR codes on signage and have an interactive walking tour of Millbrook that people could do on their mobile devices. This is quite unique. Also, we would be conveying the Township of Cavan Monaghan's friendly sense of and reputation as a community, unifying the feel of the community through design, decluttering by combining destinations on signs where possible. And one of the projects I did when I was with the city of Hamilton is took a street light and turned it into a sign and gateway into the community. That's how you can do unique things with wayfinding and signage, even if it's a stoplight. So the last thing is creating a consistent plan and hierarchy to follow for future signage. Next slide, please. So this is the wayfinding hierarchy. You have identification signs, which is the most common type, directional signs, informational signs, which marks facilities and areas with information, and regulatory signs. The graphic below shows you what signs look like to the human scale, the shape and their size and placement. And at this point, they lack any life in terms of color or graphics, which takes us to the next slide. This is an example of a typical wayfinding strategy where the graphics, colors, textures, fit and finishes have all been ironed out by the community that provides it with a standard that for any future signage or wayfinding projects, this will be followed. So what we're presenting to council is the concept that this committee would work in conjunction with the council to develop a wayfinding and placemaking and signage strategy to elevate the current standards that we have with graphics into the signage and built realm that now becomes something that goes from paper to structure. And the last slide. So this is the current logo standards guide that the municipality has. And to the right is the current very rough concept that we have for the railroad signage. But we're coming here to say that we need additional funds for this particular sign to be finished. It'll be a four-sided structure. But at the same time, presenting to the council a long-term wayfinding and signage strategy that could be adopted to future signs so that we wouldn't be constantly coming to council to say, hey, what do you think of this? Any questions?
Thanks, John. And Ashley for the presentation. Questions, members of council? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to John. So this idea of the QR codes, I get that. Is there any thought about putting them on kind of a sticker type thing? So this is going to be a progressively changing development over the years. I'd hate to see them have to redo whole signs just to update some electronic mapping of the community. Is that something in your realm of thinking about?
Through the mayor to Councilor Byrne, definitely. I don't think we want to build obsolescence. So something that is unique like QR codes could be easily done by an affixed sticker. And if it does happen to change, then it could be modified.
Thanks, John. Question, Councilor Natchell.
Thank you through you, Chair. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ashley, for the presentation and as well for your dedication to supporting this committee as well. You guys are doing really good work. I just more of a comment. I'm like really like the the thoughts that you're taking towards the wayfinding. I was just recently this week down in Niagara, and just it's a shining example of how effective that works to direct people, whether it's the wine route, the cycling route, accommodations, if it's outdoor, it's recreational. I think that, you know, minus the vineyards, well, I guess rolling grape would count, but you know, minus that, we have a lot of similarities as to what they have down there to showcase the tourism elements of it. So I think that that's a really strong idea as well. I've been in other areas where using QR codes was highly effective, especially for larger cities with international people, very, you know, adaptable with the technologies that are going on today. So I'm definitely, I think that's a great initiative to bring forward to the committee to definitely, I can see a lot of applications within the community with throughout the township actually for our things that we have to showcase. So thanks. I really like it. Good job, guys.
Thank you. Ms. Hurley.
Thank you. Thank you both for the presentation. I just have a couple questions, and I think, if I may, through you, Chair, to Council, I think there's a bit of confusion with regards to the wayfinding project. It's a new project, correct? It's basically, I think you have a combination of requesting under your capital to move the additional signage funding under your capital. But I believe your additional funds for wayfinding is under operating. And I think that's where that ask came under an operating, not under a capital. And it's not a capital, it's not an operating. It's a new ask. It's a new project, which is wayfinding. I know how it fits into your other signage projects that you want to do, but you want to establish the wayfinding so it's a consistent look throughout. I understand that, but through me, I do believe, Council, that should be a capital project, a full capital project, not a portion additional cost under the operating. The current operating, the ask under operating is operating. I think the confusion comes when it comes to the cemetery signage, which is identified under the operating, and the ask additional funds for the wayfinding potential new project should be moved from operating over to capital, and then therefore it should be discussed under the capital requests.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Hurley. Yeah, I had a number of questions. I do think that there's some confusion in the presentation from the operating budget. There's some components that are hard to follow in that regard. And I understand, we've had a running line item with regard to cemetery signage, but we've had that line for years. And I think for the last 5 years, there's only been $300 ever spent on the signage. But I know that there's another project that we were waiting. I think the Ebenezer, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to get the name wrong. Miss Ellis, you have that? Sorry, I can't see it, Karen. I can't see you waving. If you can maybe speak to that, because I'm just curious, to me, there just needs to be some cleanup. And then before you go, Miss Ellis, the only other component is, as you mentioned and demonstrated, the logo and components of wayfinding and signage is a municipal responsibility. So I think that there's an opportunity to work together with the Mr. Hack Advisory Committee on the composition of that, but to work on improving the branding and the templates for that sort of work. But I don't see it as being a totally delegated project to an advisory committee, because we've had that consideration. I think it was the last term of council, and I believe it's coming back again from the county about participating in a county-wide wayfinding consistency. So there's a lot of moving factors with, obviously wayfinding is critically important. And I think you can see from the logo component and conversation hasn't been really discussed or updated since 2008. So there's lots of conversations. It's always just been a matter of budget pressures, because it would be nice to update every sign throughout the municipality all at once. Unfortunately, signs, like everything else, cost thousands of dollars to install, design, and create. So I think that there's a few components I had similar questions that Ms. Hurley sort of seems that there needs to be some cleanup with regards to the operation, so we can divide out capital projects for capital projects. Ms. Ellis, maybe you want to speak to that, the cemetery project.
Thank you, Mayor Graham, to members of council and members of the gallery. So the cemetery signage was to install signage at Ebenezer Cemetery, which is a historic cemetery that's no longer active, but there is a monument there, and the Springville Cemetery over across from Springville Church. So we do have lots of information on Springville at this moment in time. We are having a little bit of difficulty getting information on Ebenezer, but we are still digging and making connections with people who can help us. So
So we haven't spent any of those monies while we do this. Sorry, I feel bizarre looking at you like this. Don't move, John. It's absolutely fine. But it's just comical from my perspective. With regard, so we haven't invested, or there, that's why it's not showing, even though to me it's a capital project. It's under an operating line. We haven't had any cost because we're still doing due diligence on the two components of that project. Is that a fair summary? You can just nod. Okay, that's so I understand. Okay, that explains that one question I had with regards to the budget. John, I think you want to speak to something I said. Go for it.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. One of the things that we wanted to do as a committee was to not assess a cost to the town regarding a wayfinding strategy, but do that as a committee of the Revitalization and Historical Advisory Committee, and then bring our work to council and staff for approval and adoption. Because my biggest concern is we have a new sign at CMCC. We have another sign at Needler's Mill. If we're not careful, we're going to end up with a menagerie of uncoordinated signs and then be in a real pickle later on when we do have a strategy in place of having these things sticking out like sore thumbs. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if we were to fast track that process with our committee and then work with the council of coming ahead with an adopted strategy. And then one of the first projects out of that new strategy would be the railway signage. So we're not asking the town or council to approve extra costs to develop the strategy. That would come from our committee.
And I can understand it. I think where I'm caught is in the wayfinding conversation, there's the municipal wayfinding and then there's the historical wayfinding. And what I felt as though the presentation alluded to is the kind of the drawbacks or limitations of the kind of archaic, let's say, that's dated, logo and design policy and signage policies that the township is still under because it hasn't been approved in previous budgets due to the cost associated. So I guess maybe for clarity, are we talking about the establishing, like obviously in an ideal world, they'll be consistent, but is the committee talking about designing sort of a template and branding for the historical elements within the township, or, and then that might be adopted or replicated or somewhat factored into the additional wayfinding throughout the township, which obviously would be a separate entity? Is that kind of the catalyst? I'm just trying to understand, because it's a different conversation if we're, if in my reading of the report or the presentation, it talks a lot about all of it, which isn't the jurisdiction or in the terms of reference for the advisory committee. The historical components are, and especially with regards to the cemeteries. So I think where it could be a critical joint project if there's sort of give and take and input given with regards to the stylistic, but more specifically from, and maybe identifying critical historical projects for that signage to also be done. So I think by breaking out some monies in the municipal budget for capital investment with regards to a larger wayfinding project, or maybe a part of a larger wayfinding project, then you could work together harmoniously, simultaneously, even though your focus may be a little more on the historical, but keeping consistency with the rest of the township project that we can sort of incrementally improve throughout the township, because we're not going to be able to, I don't envision a world where we'll be able to afford to replace every sign that could exist at one time, but sort of on a gradual basis, year over year, allocate a certain amount of money to. Does that make some sense, John? Is that inconsistent or is that disruptive? But obviously we got to work out some of the operational capital components, but I think that might be a good way to move forward and sort of keep the committee on track with the jurisdiction and kind of all of the dedicated and isolated and directed work that we're trying to maintain with regards to the historical components and flagging those so we're aware of them and then can work together year over year to talk about the content and design and layouts with those projects as we move forward. Does that sort of make some sense, John?
Somewhat, but when I think of revitalization and historical advisory committee, part of the revitalization is a community-wide revitalization, like, for example, working in conjunction with BIA. So one of these things that we were looking at was beyond just the historical signage, how do we get continuity with all of our public realm signage, including those that might be historical, but also when we have continuity throughout the community, then those things become well-known and identifiable as being as something of special character and nature that should be paid attention to. And therefore, when somebody comes into the community, not only looking at the Welcome to Millbrook sign, and they're looking at the library or whatever else, they're also seeing other signage components that are equally important, but they're tied into a common theme.
Yeah, and I agree, there's a role, like an advisory role for the committee to play and participate in that. I just don't, like, the question again comes back to the operational capital component. It's, to me, it's a municipal capital program that the advisory committee is a part of that process. It's not an advisory capital budget program. It's, you know, the capital, the investment in the signage is owned by the municipality, so it should be a municipal capital project. But the coordination therein and, you know, even suggestions and specific content for the historical components, et cetera, like all, and additional, not just historical, could be all be provided to the municipality in the advisory capacity. The execution becomes a municipal capital project is kind of what I'm saying versus a committee capital project, just for the sake of argument. I think Ms. Hurley wants to maybe correct something I've said, so I better let her go before I keep going.
Ms. Hurley does not want to do that. What I would like through you, Chair, to Council and to John and Ashley, I think we're both talking about the same thing. Okay. I think that what I would like to do, if you support and Council supports it, is we received the presentation portion today, but we go back, we have a conversation. And I think the layout of operating and capital is where we need to have a conversation and how it's to be presented. So it could be presented at the next meeting and we can get clarity, but I do believe we're sort of speaking the same. I think it's how it's laid out is not where I think the committee's intention really wanted to be. It's just understanding how our internal operations are budget wise of how we're operating and our capital is. So if you would permit us, I think we could sit down and have a conversation and really have an understanding of what the ask is and where those asks should be identified within the budget. The other component too is also with regards to the student and the funds for the student. We want to clarify that as well, because I think Ms. Ellis and Ms. Pope have had a conversation of what that cost would be, and that's different than what's being presented today. So if Council would consider that, staff would definitely sit down and talk to Ashley and John and the committee about what they're really looking for.
Okay, we'll consider that when we get to the motion. I have Councillor Byrne, then Councillor Natchoff.
Through the chair to Ashley, I was a little concerned or trying to understand the scope of your heritage inventory. Is that going to take in the entire township, like North Monaghan, Cavan South, and Millbrook, or is that going to be focused mostly on just Millbrook?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Byrne, I believe that is the existing inventory is township wide. So it would be updating the existing township wide inventory.
Councillor Natchoff.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So this is kind of a two-part question. I think the first part might be for you and then the other part can be for Ms. Pope. With the student that you're speaking about for the summer job, so the $29,000, is my assumption you're going to try to get, it'll be like a Fleming or Trent student that will come on. So if that, or maybe you can describe where the student, you'll identify them and get them from. So the first part would be, would there be the potential for this student to have this as part of their curriculum so that they don't necessarily have to be paid a full 29,000. And then the second part of the question is, would this qualify under, or could we apply for funding for the Canada Summer Jobs Program to compensate for this?
Ms. Hurley?
Through you, I think there's clarification that needs to be had about what we're asking for the summer student for. And I think Ms. Ellis is probably the best person to clarify what that student's job description would be.
Are you insinuating she's going to answer that? I can't see. Is she answering that now or are we talking later? Okay.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Graham, members of council. So the summer student job description would include assisting in the completion of the draft bylaws that are currently in process. And they would also participate in creating new information. So we have had a couple of requests from property owners who do want their property designated. So we need assistance in the research for that project. And they would also look to prepare or update the cultural mapping project, which would be inventorying our existing assets, deleting things that no longer exist, providing research so that when we have those assets on the map, there's a description to go with that. So that's the primary purpose of the summer student. We are looking for a student with some heritage or historical schooling and background, because we need expertise, particularly in research. And I believe through Ms. Pope that we will be applying for a grant to subsidize the rate.
Okay, good discussion. So I was conferring with the clerk, but I think we can come up with a little bit of additional motion rather than just, obviously we can receive the report and presentation for information, or the presentation for information, but also with the addition that staff have a follow-up meeting with Mr. Hack committee to clarify the operating and capital budget discrepancies. So that would be a two-part motion. If we have a mover and a seconder for that, moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Councilor Nachow, all in favor? That is approved. Thanks very much to both of you for coming forward. We'll schedule that meeting with staff and go forth as such. Next on the council agenda, 6.6, Lisa Crawford, Sustainability Advisory Committee. Can we do it right after her? I just want to get, I don't know, that she doesn't have to wait. Welcome, Lisa. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Lisa Crawford. I am the Vice Chair with the Sustainability Advisory Committee. I'm here presenting a document created by myself and Leslie Bilcox, who is the chair. First slide, please. In 2024, the committee supported an energy auditor to assist with the updating of the Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan, a requirement of the Ontario Electricity Act. This updating is required and will support the township plan for municipal and community energy demand management. This plan must be updated every 5 years, and the data awareness will set up the township for future success. We're now looking to engage further with the mandates of the Climate Change Action Plan and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So we've described those guiding documents in this slide. And reflected that other municipalities of similar size direct full-time staff to manage these requirements. Next slide. We have planned, after this audit is complete, we are looking to 2025 to implement some community programming that will meet several target areas of the Climate Change Action Plan. The first is rain barrels, something that we had already did this year to great success. So we would like to continue to sell rain barrels at a discounted rate to township residents and implement a residential tree planting program. So work with a local tree supplier to sell 2-gallon native trees to residents at a discounted rate as well. So putting $5,000 towards the rain barrels, $7,500 towards the tree planting, to which the resident would pay a fee for each rain barrel and tree, but it would be discounted by the township. We would like to establish an Earth Day sustainability community event. Having yet to decide what that fully looks like, we imagine it would be in partnership with ongoing events. And it would be an opportunity to sell or do the pickup for the trees and rain barrels. We have an ongoing water conservation initiative for the toilet upgrade rebate, which since running again in 2024, I think has had an increased uptake among residents. Very positive feedback. And we will continue to work towards the update of the Energy Conservation Demand Management Plan. And we would like to request that as we put funding towards our community initiatives, rain barrels, trees, and the Earth Day sustainability event, that because there's a fee that residents will provide, it will be subsidized. As these balances shake out, if there is leftover funding, that it go towards a climate change reserve fund. So overall, the Sustainability Committee is prioritizing initiatives that achieve multiple goals in both the Climate Change Action Plan and the Energy Demand Conservation Plan, while raising awareness in the community. We are also ensuring that programs are equally beneficial and offered to all residents within the Township of Cavan-Monaghan. The committee is focused on developing communications that provide information to residents on available climate and energy initiatives to encourage participation in climate adaptation and mitigation initiatives as set out by the Climate Change Action Plan. Our request for the Sustainability Committee is $15,000 in 2025. For reference, in 2024, we received $35,000 to cover the energy auditor and $5,000 for community programs. This year, we are asking $15,000 for community programs. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for the presentation, Lisa. Questions, members of council? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, just so I understand, you were suggesting a full-time staff to deal with this at one point early on in the presentation. Could you maybe just give me some idea what you're thinking there, please?
Oh, sorry, just for clarification, there's no recommendation for a staff position. There is just other municipalities have a dedicated staff position to manage these sorts of things. We're doing it from the committee standpoint at this point in time. So just for clarity, I have a question, if I might. So I just want to make sure that I'm reading that. So with regards to like the tree planting, for example, we talk about, so the cost is $20 per tree and we're going to sell them for 10. So there's going to be a municipal subsidy, but don't we need 15,000 to buy all the trees and get the $10 back from the residents? So like, we're not going to be able to buy 750 trees without $15,000. Is sort of like, or are they giving us this, or we can make the 50% of that payment half, like, can we pay half up front and then half with the revenue? Is that the idea? Like, I'm just looking for clarity. And then I probably have another question about that.
Okay, to you, Chair. We have no standing agreement with the tree supplier to enact something like that. Trees can be purchased for a fall planting and then they would overwinter, or they can be purchased in the spring. So that could be an opportunity to manage those finances. For the rain barrel program that we implemented, it was a similar thing. We purchased a certain number, and then as payments came in, we realized we had extra income, can purchase more, and it was a very popular program. I believe we had a waiting list. So there is opportunity for perhaps 2 pickup dates, 2 sales dates that would assist with that.
And a follow-up on that, I know through working with Miller Valley Trails that I believe it's through Orca that we usually receive significantly subsidized, either free when it's through the TD program that usually participates with Orca and Miller Valley Trails. So there are these other programs through, whether it's private companies or things like that, where they offer, whether it's additional subsidies for tree or seedlings, or they offer them free of charge. Is that something that the committee can also look into, sort of, rather than having to focus all on the capital up front? There's other partnerships that might be able to help with that subsidy to even either reduce the cost to the providers or expand the program like you thought. Is that something the committee's been investigating at all?
To you, Chair, this program, the residential tree planting, provides we based it off of something that Duro has established. And so working with a tree supplier, you can order 15 different species to varying amounts. The Orca program sells seedling, like 1-year-old small trees, and you purchase bundles of 25. So they do also provide, it's a native species. It is an opportunity, I think, that we could explore that. The benefit of working with the larger trees is they're that much further along. They come in a 2-gallon container. I believe that the Orca trees are also bare root, so the transfer from purchase to pickup becomes a little bit more complicated for the survival rates of the tree. So there are opportunities, but based on the success of the Duro program, which had 100% sales, everything sold out, and people were very happy with it.
I think Mr. Phillips wanted to weigh in, if I'm not mistaken.
Through you, Chair to Council, she covered it pretty good, actually. But just to clarify on the revenue part, so we can, as long as our revenue and our costs don't go over our budget allowance, Ms. Polk does allow that to continue. We haven't done that yet with the rain barrels or anything, but there is potential there depending on the ordering. But yeah, as for that part, we do investigate all the Orca initiatives and everything. We've looked at quite a few of them. We'll continue to look at them. But yeah, Duro was really successful, and the size of trees was really what we liked.
Thank you for that, Mr. Phillips. Other questions, Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair, if I got a little bit of a handle on this, so I get the idea of the life expectancy being better when you get a potted plant. But when you start getting into different species and different age for different growths that are better, the cost from the tree supplier is going to be significantly different from one variation to another, I'm guessing. So are we talking about like a flat subsidy where it'd be a percentage of the whatever you decide to buy? And then how do you try to expect what's going to turn out for demand? Or is that a thing that we can do on you apply, you pay, and we supply the tree at some future month or something?
Chair, to Councillor Byrne. So the expectation is we reached out to a local tree supplier that Duro had used, and they supplied the average cost for a tree. So you're right, there are varying costs, but she said between $12 and $18. So if we averaged or placed as we did $20, we should, the $10 fee, everything will work out. The Duro had their order placed and then offered that the array of trees that they purchased to the public. And when sales were done, they were done. And Orca, I believe, does a similar thing. They only have a certain stock available. And when they run out, based on tree popularity, the sales are done.
Thank you. Councillor Nacho.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and the new committee. You guys are doing really good work. This is exciting stuff to add to our portfolio in the community. I just wanted to, just more of an observation. I really like the idea of coming up with an Earth Day event within the community, and I can see a lot of kind of tie-in with like the public school and like an educational element, given that I just researched and it's the 22nd of April. So it could kind of like tie in maybe the opportunity as well for like that early spring kind of event. So I think it's a exciting opportunity to tie in both educational wise and bring more recognition for Earth Day. So thanks.
I have a question for Ms. Pope while she's working on electrical matters. Just a question. One of the thoughts that I had is obviously, while we're continually competing for revenue streams, if individuals in the community, I think because it's an advisory committee as it's structured, but we've done this with Millbrook High Trails before, if it's clear that certain members of the community are very interested and might potentially want to fiscally support some efforts within the sustainability community beyond simply purchasing trees or rain barrels or things of that matter. But so one of the thoughts I had is when you're doing these events, it gives you an opportunity to potentially fundraise, right? Or, you know, whether it's by donation, like you could purchase the trees for 10, but if you wanted to make a donation because the costs are excess, then it takes the money. If you're so capable, you can reduce your, you know, not require the justification exclusively from the municipal tax levy, but also just from personally supporting the program. By maybe I'll pay the $20 for one tree instead of just the 10 because I don't need the subsidy and I want the trees and support the program. Is that something that this committee can do, or is that something that the township, being, you know, just from a legal standpoint, that we could have that opportunity to help assist the committee if there's going to be, because even at the Earth Day ceremony, there might be fundraise opportunities there with the people that want to just support it, whether it's change, even like change drives and that. I'm just not sure if that's something that the sustainability committee is set up and capable of doing. So maybe you can speak to that.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to the council. Basically, that's kind of a twofold question. So number one, can we take donations? 100% we can, especially for amazing initiatives like you're presenting today. We need to be clear that what type of receipt we give. A lot of people assume because we're a municipality that I can give a charitable donation receipt. That can only occur when you're giving in general format, not to a specific program, because you cannot have strings attached when you're giving a charitable donation receipt. However, it doesn't mean we can't give a receipt. It's just not a charitable donation receipt. And if there are any funds that are coming in, because we do the accounting for a sustainability accessibility committee within our budget under boards and authorities, we can have an additional line set up to receive those donations through. So it's all fiscally accounted for. So we can absolutely work with you to do that as well. And as far as the bill back, when you're talking about shared costing, the $20 versus the 10 by the municipality, when the order is placed, if they're receiving those funds right at the forefront before the product is delivered to the recipient, we can acknowledge then right away the $10 is received, or if they're choosing to give that additional donation, there would be $10 received, and then in the donation category, the additional $10 at that time. So we can definitely work together, but I just wanted to draw that line about charitable donation receipt and no assumption there for that. That's all.
So just so we're tax receipt, but since giving we're talking, I was thinking more smaller increments that the receipt really wouldn't be merited. But I think so that's one part. But in the other part, if someone wanted to make a more sizable donation, which we have had people supporting committees and projects in the past, is allocating it or identifying it for sustainability purposes and us having a reserve set aside for that. Does that, even that specificity, make it non-tax receipt eligible? Or is it, or like, I'm trying to just understand, we want to make sure that it works the most permanent. Like if, so what is the level of specificity that makes it ineligible is kind of what I'm saying for the tax receipt purpose. But this is also not pertinent to this conversation. We can have this conversation offline as well. But I think with regards to setting up the reserve, it makes some sense to have a pool of funds that can also be going to this. Because I know, there's certain individuals that, have the means to support these programs. And, I've had conversations with several, so it'd be nice to have an opportunity to support the program outside of the levy as well. So you can speak to that, sure.
I think just the key point is no strings attached. So if you're giving the funds to the municipality to choose for whatever purpose, and you would not be upset if those funds were moved, say, over to Parks and Recreation or something like else, if something else were to happen, that's basically giving without strings, where then the municipality is in full control. We can give charitable donation receipts for that. Anything else that's specified, I want it to stay there. Even if you finish that program, I still want it to stay there. That is specific strings attached. I can give a regular receipt like any other business, but I cannot give a CRA issued charitable donation receipt.
All right, well, definitely something that staff can work with the committee about, and seeing if it's an opportunity and how viable, and making sure we're just above board from a legal standpoint with regards to the finance. Sure. Any other questions? If not, we can move to receive the presentation from Lisa and the Chair of Sustainability Advisory Committee for information. Moved by Councilor Burns, second by Councilor Natchop. All in favor? That is approved. Thanks, Lisa. So that is the final presentation from an advisory committee. So we're going to take a brief break, and then we'll come back for Ms. Pope's main event. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of their days to come and present, and we will be back shortly.